Imagine a time when merely mentioning the legions of Rome made any enemy tremble. And it was no coincidence. The Roman legionaries carried with them centuries of tradition in combat strategies, rigorous discipline, and a military recruitment process that left no trace of weakness. In that world, every soldier was forged by sweat, pain, and the conviction that defending the empire meant defending one's own honor. It is in this environment that we find characters such as Vegetius, an ever-curious scholar who recorded on scrolls all the training and selection methods that made the troops so feared. Likewise, men like Centurion Crispus maintained a strict line in the camps, ensuring that newcomers like Gaius understood that life in the Roman army had no room for indecision. With every step, every order, and every discipline imposed within the ranks, the history of the empire unfolded before their watchful eyes. And if you want to discover how these simple men from the countryside, together with the more experienced veterans, built a military force respected throughout the ancient world, you are in the right place. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our videos filled with historical curiosities about ancient Rome. Have you ever wondered what happened to a young peasant at the exact moment he decided to leave the plow behind and take up the sword? Get ready to discover the starting point where discipline and sheer willpower converged in one courageous heart. The seed of the desire to serve, the desire to enlist in the Roman army, generally arose from the fascination young people had with tales of bravery. There wasn't a boy who didn't dream of donning armor, marching side by side with great officers, and receiving the acclaim of the crowds upon returning victorious. Gaius was no exception. He grew up listening to legends about heroes who saved Rome from barbarian invasions. All of this encouraged him to abandon the peaceful life of the countryside and venture through the enlistment gates. For the Senate, represented by politicians like Tiberius, this influx of rural recruits was a blessing. The peasants had strong bodies, accustomed to long hours of work, and therefore ready to endure endless marches. Moreover, there was a belief that peasants were more resilient to hardships since they rarely enjoyed everyday luxuries. However, the mere desire to serve did not guarantee success. Many gave up during the very first aptitude tests. The Roman military recruitment spared no effort in eliminating those incapable of marching long distances, carrying heavy weapons, and maintaining absolute obedience. At that initial moment, Vegetius observed everything, noting who possessed the quick eye and the impeccable posture he so frequently cited in his texts as essential for the future soldier. If the desire to fight was just the initial spark, nothing prepared the new recruits for the whirlwind of evaluations that lay ahead. Can you believe that even the way one smiled could earn points toward becoming a legionary? The rigorous screening. The enlistment began with a meticulous selection process. Doctors assessed the recruits' health, measuring their height, checking their visual acuity, and even testing the firmness of their grip. Centurion Crispus roamed the training yard, posing incisive questions such as, "Where is your homeland? What is your experience with tools? Can you endure extreme cold and heat?" Some answers showcased determination, others revealed complete inexperience. Beyond the physical, the mind was also put to the test. The Romans valued discipline and the ability to think under pressure. It was even remarked that a good sense of humor and a willingness to share joy during breaks were seen as positive traits. A good-humored soldier kept the morale of the troop high, something fundamental to legionary discipline. Vegetius wrote that an army with strong cohesion could win battles even before wielding its weapons. Another intriguing step was the background check. Many candidates came from humble families, but with spotless reputations. For the empire, that meant an honest commitment to the ranks. If it was discovered that someone was related to deserters or traitors, that individual was summarily dismissed. The people of Rome lived by a principle: better a soldier without money than a legionary without honor. Once approved in the initial phase, the recruits discovered that simple marching was only the beginning. Can you imagine facing kilometers of daily walking with heavy equipment? The real trial by fire was about to begin. The rhythm of the exhausting marches. As soon as they passed the screening, the novices were subjected to intense marches. Day after day, they left the camp at dawn, traversing dirt roads, crossing woodlands, climbing steep hills, and fording shallow rivers. They carried shields, spears, food, and various gear, totaling a weight that many had never borne before. The idea was simple. If they couldn't endure the march, they wouldn't survive the battles to come. It was on one of these marches that Gaius realized life in the Roman army was beyond any romantic notion. His legs trembled, his breath came in gasps, yet seeing veteran soldiers enduring the same route without complaint spurred him on. Here, a part of the legionary discipline was developed. A sense of collective responsibility, the certainty that no one could stop, for that would jeopardize the entire formation. At the end of each march, many recruits were so exhausted they collapsed to the ground. Even so, the officers checked for proper alignment, the cleanliness of the weapons, and the integrity of the equipment. At that moment, Centurion Crispus ensured that any gross mistake was punished, maintaining strict discipline in the field. And, of course, Vegetius took note of everything, always attentive to record each methodology that, in his view, made Rome victorious. After proving their endurance on those arduous paths, there remained another challenge, just as fundamental as marching, swimming. Could plunging into icy waters be the difference between victory and defeat? The power of water and character building. In ancient Rome, swimming was not a luxury, it was a strategic skill. Under the supervision of specialized instructors, recruits were taken to rivers and lakes to improve their physical conditioning. The cold water invigorated the body and also taught emotional control. Panic during a crossing could condemn the entire legion if a river had to be traversed during a mission. For Gaius, who had only ever bathed in the shallow streams of his village, the experience was shocking. The current, the feeling of being unsupported, and the exposure to cold forced him to overcome his fears. By the end of the first sessions, he realized that this training granted him greater endurance and increased his stamina. He felt ready for even greater challenges. Swimming skills also had practical applications. In times of war, bridges might be destroyed, forcing troops to ford deep waters. And we cannot forget about hygiene, although bathing wasn't a daily ritual like in some modern cultures. Imperial Rome valued public baths for cleanliness and social interaction. In that sense, knowing how to swim was a quality that combined health, military tactics, and even a sense of community. If surviving long marches and icy immersions already seems extreme, just wait until you discover how the recruits were introduced to weapons. From now on, they would hold in their hands the power to decide battles. What will this long-awaited moment of transition be like? The first contact with weapons. The pinnacle of training arrived when the recruits received their first gladius. Initially made of wood and even heavier than the actual sword, it was an instrument for building muscle strength and refining movement. With it, Gaius learned thrusting techniques, understanding that piercing the enemy was far more efficient than attempting wide, risky slashes. In addition to the gladius, there was the scutum, the famous rectangular shield that protected much of the body. Learning to wield both the shield and the sword together required coordination and discipline. Every step, every defensive angle, every counterattack Under the guidance of Centurion Crispus, a good Roman legionary was distinguished not only by raw strength, but by the almost surgical precision in each movement. During these drills, Vegetius made it clear that the development of combat skills did not happen overnight. It was the exhaustive practice, repeated dozens of times a day, that forged true warriors. When everyone mastered the attacking posture, the troop transformed into a single deadly machine, ready to execute combat strategies. With perfection, have you ever wondered how these meticulous training sessions laid the foundation for an invincible empire? If you're enjoying this so far, hit that like button so we can continue delivering stories as impactful as this one. What comes after learning how to wield a sword and shield? An entire arsenal awaited mastery. Stick around and discover how. The art of launching projectiles made the legions unbeatable in any kind of confrontation. The secret arsenal: sling, javelin, and bow. As much as the sword symbolized the power of the Roman soldier, the versatility of the troops came from their ranged and long-distance weapons. The sling, for example, was trained by everyone as hurling. Stones with precision could destabilize the enemy formation even before close combat ensued. This demonstrated that legionary discipline went beyond marching and hand-to-hand fighting. It involved mastering a variety of techniques. The javelin, known as the pilum, was another fundamental tool. Thrown with force and precision, its tip was designed to bend upon impact, preventing the enemy from reusing it. For the Roman legionaries, this meant an advantage during the initial strikes of a battle. And when we consider the bow, we realize that many talented recruits received extra training to shoot arrows. Whether on foot or from horseback, it was clear that the Roman Empire triumphed not only due to brute strength, but also through the intelligence of combining tactics and training each soldier for multiple combat scenarios. Any legionary, in theory, could function as infantry, light artillery, or even supporting cavalry. This was yet another point that Vegetius carefully recorded in his scrolls, convinced that such versatility would be remembered as one of the pillars of Rome's combat strategies. So far you've seen just how comprehensive the training of the infantryman was. But what about those who rode toward the forefront? Follow along to discover how the Roman cavalry dominated both plains and mountains with equal skill. The strength of the cavalry. The Roman cavalry stood out for its agility and reconnaissance capabilities. Contrary to popular belief, the army did not rely solely on auxiliaries from distant regions. Many native Romans trained intensively in horse handling. Getting on and off a moving saddle, even in full armor, was a basic requirement for anyone who wanted to join these elite detachments. The training involved various coordination exercises, galloping in a straight line, forming circles, or defensive triangles, and executing rapid charges. Although Centurion Crispus mainly oversaw the infantry, he actively participated in planning the marching routes together with the cavalry. After all, the cohesion between cavalry and infantry could determine the outcome of crucial battles for the empire. At the same time, Vegetius observed how the cavalry played a psychological role against adversaries. When well trained and armed with lances, the Roman cavalry was feared for the speed at which they could attack and retreat, frustrating enemies who could not organize an effective defense against these lightning assaults. But military life wasn't only about using weapons. How did the legionaries handle the daily tasks which, although less glamorous, were equally essential to sustain the troops? Beyond weapons, the support routine. Between sword drills, there were tasks related to construction, repairs, and setting up camps. Digging ditches, erecting palisades, and assembling tents were part of the daily reality for the Roman legionaries. This arduous work not only strengthened the body, but also fostered a spirit of cooperation among the soldiers. It was common for Gaius and other recruits to share tools and personal stories, forging bonds they would never forget. For the Empire, these engineering skills were of enormous value. Bridges, roads, and walls were erected astonishingly quickly, thanks to the soldiers' labor. Even Senator Tiberius, who spent his days far from the front lines, recognized the importance of having an army capable of both building and demolishing with equal efficiency. Vegetius noted that this level of self-sufficiency kept the legions ahead of nearly all the enemies of the time. While barbarians relied on luck and the natural environment for shelter, the Romans could erect temporary cities in a matter of days. The discipline acquired through these duties reflected in every other aspect of military life, creating an army of versatile men ready for any challenge. With such rigorous training in place, it was time to distinguish those truly ready to defend the empire. But how did this ceremony transform mere recruits into true legionaries? The final trial and the oath. After months of physical, mental, and emotional tests, the moment came to evaluate who truly had the necessary mettle. The most capable stood out during training, demonstrating absolute control of their weapons and a keen sense of strategy in simulated battles. The less prepared were dismissed, usually given a chance to return after some time if they had grown stronger. The climax occurred when the approved recruits were gathered to perform the sacramentum, the Roman military oath. Before superior officers and the legion's standard, they swore eternal loyalty to Rome. Some accounts even mentioned that recruits received marks on their skin as a sign of the unbreakable pact they made with the empire. For many, this was the most anticipated day, the official transition from an ordinary man to a professional soldier. When Gaius finally took his oath, he was overcome with a mix of pride and responsibility. He would have to honor that vow with every step he took within the army. Centurion Crispus saw in him the result of intense training. Vegetius, meanwhile, recognized the living continuation of Rome's legacy. The empire remained in good hands, provided that both legionary discipline and strict military recruitment continued to uphold tradition. Everything seemed in place for the formidable Roman war machine. But could training and discipline alone explain its success? Stay tuned for the final act to understand how every detail contributed to the greatness of Rome. The living legacy of Rome. Despite all the harsh training and constant pressure, life within the Roman ranks offered an incomparable sense of belonging. Young peasants, urban nobles, veterans, and officers, everyone shared the same burden and the same glory. From this union arose the invincibility that the world witnessed time and again on battlefields across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Vegetius always emphasized that Rome's greatest weakness would be to relax its standards of selection or ease the rigors of training. He believed that the empire's downfall would come if the initial commitment of the recruits was not maintained throughout their years of service. And indeed, as some legions strayed from these principles, problems began to surface along the most vulnerable borders. Today, as we recall the success of the Roman legionaries, we realize that their triumph was the result of a combination of factors: an extremely selective Roman military recruitment, unyielding legionary discipline that did not tolerate failure, and combat strategies that evolved over centuries. If you enjoyed this journey through ancient Rome and want to keep following such thrilling stories, subscribe to our channel now, leave a comment, and share this video with your friends. Let's keep the flame of these incredible narratives alive, so that more people can be inspired by the extraordinary legacy of Rome's warriors.